Oh, good number. Clayton, of course. Clayton. Okay. Anyway. So, let's begin with a little meditation, as we usually do. Quiet your mind. Don't just be sitting there. Actually focus your attention on the respiration and use that as a pillar to tie the wild elephant of your mind so it doesn't go to other thoughts. When you breathe out, think all the things that presently bother me, that I'm afraid of, that cause me problem. They'll eventually disappear, just like the breath. All the things that I'm attached to, that I'm hoping to keep for a long time, will inevitably disintegrate. And withdraw your attention to your mental consciousness. Try to focus on its clear light nature. Letting go of whatever comes to your mind. See if you can perceive the sense of the ego. Recognize how it seems to be existing there, irrefutably from its own side. See if you can sense also the way in which the mind is reacting to that. Whether the mind is subtly believing that, whether the ignorance grasping to a self of persons is present or not. Such a self as is appearing to the mind, existing as though from its own side without the need of simply being called something, actually having a real, true existence, inherent existence. If it existed, it would have to be able to be found either inherently one with the body and mind, or inherently different, other than the body and mind. Although there's a temptation to think, oh, it's different than the body and mind, it's a soul of a different entity continuing on. If it had such an existence, it would have to be utterly different than the body and mind. There would have to be no connection with the body and mind at all if it inherently existed different as a different entity than the mind, the body. If it were inherently one with the body and mind, as there are the two, body and mind, there'd have to be two selves. As these different alternatives are impossible, see if you can let go of that consciousness that's grasping to the self, the ignorance grasping to an I, by developing its antidote, a wisdom that recognizes the self is empty of existing the way that it appears. It doesn't exist that way at all, as it from its own side. Body, the mind, all phenomena are exactly the same. They appear to our senses due to our own karma. The dependent arising that has no inherent appearance in any particular way appears in different ways. And due to grasping from beginningless time, we assent to that appearance as though it findable from its own side. All living beings who've been our mother numberless times and depthlessly kind, grasping to a self now, self of persons, grasping to self of phenomena, give rise to self-cherishing thought. And even though they want to be happy, they destroy the causes of it. Although they want to be free from suffering, they run toward the causes and conditions of suffering. So think, for their welfare, for the welfare of all living beings, I'm going to participate tonight in the class in mind training to better understand the disadvantages of self-cherishing thought, self-grasping, how to find the vital points of eliminating them. So that I can eventually become enlightened for the sake of all living beings. And then relax. Bring your attention back to the present. There's a seat there. You'd like to be in close. So, not all of you come to the Thursday night class, I think. No? Some of you do. So we're going to have a quiz tonight. I think Georgie missed the last one, so he has to take 2 tonight. No, sure. Could you pass up one of you then? To that side and that's enough. Could you? Yeah, it's good to get up, spread those legs, share them around. There you go. Okay. There's Bodhisattva. Have enough? So what we're going to do is, for the next 5 minutes, Dorji? Did Dorji get one? Okay. You got enough? Okay. Does everyone have a copy?
I'll get one over there.
Yeah. So for the next 5 minutes, just answer the first 13 questions. They're kind of multiple choice. True, false, multiple choice. So you've got 5 minutes. The other ones to just leave. Those you're going to do tonight. Maybe you don't need 5 minutes. Wow, that's fast, Dorji. Anyone who finishes that fast has to have 100%.
100% wrong.
No. It's easy, no? No. We use this cup when we edit the film to see where the break is, because usually the cup is moved. I have to put it so Georgie can see it when we edit the video. Suddenly the cup is in a different position. Okay. What, another minute?
Is this an open note test? An open book test?
I hope not. No. No looking. I saw that.
This is a group effort, right?
This is a group effort. Group karma, then you'll all get the same grade. Okay, everyone finished? No. Who needs another couple seconds? Beth, you okay? Finished? Okay. You finished? Okay. Are you finished? Yeah.
I've been here twice. I'm going to have to quit catch up.
Oh, okay. No problem.
That's okay.
Catch up. We'll play mustard. Okay, so you ready? You're going to mark. No? Someone else needs? Bonnie, you okay? You okay? Finish. Who said? Did someone say to stop? Okay. So self-marking. You're on honor system. No erasing and saying you got the right answer. Okay. First one. What's the right answer? The Wheel of Sharp Weapons was composed by Atisha, Dignaga, Dharmakirti, or Dharmarakshita? D. There's Dharmakirti and Dharma. Yeah.
A, B, C, and D.
Dharmarakshita, right? Okay. Easy. The Lord of Death is Mara, Yamantaka, Yama, or Indra? Yama. Who thought it was something else? No, okay. What do you think it was? Okay. Third one. The destroyer of the Lord of Death is Mara, Yamantaka, Yama, or Indra? Yamantaka. Yamantaka. Antaka means someone puts an end to. Yamantaka, someone who puts an end to Yama. The main obstacle to liberation is self-grasping, self-cherishing, anger, or desire. Self-grasping? Not anger? Okay, self-grasping. The main obstacle to bodhicitta is?
Self-cherishing.
Okay, I didn't even have to say that also. Okay. Peacocks are likened to attachment, pride, bodhisattvas, or arhats. Whoa, what'd you put? What did you put?
Proud as a peacock.
That's okay. I tried to trick you. See, that's trick. That's mean teacher trying to trick you. Okay? Meanie. Which is more rare, emptiness or the wisdom of emptiness? Did anyone say emptiness? Okay.
That wasn't your best work.
That wasn't the hardest question, was it? The main subject of the Wheel of Sharp Weapons is how to cultivate emptiness, the wisdom of emptiness, the two bodhicittas, or martial arts.
Martial arts.
I heard Diana laughing before I figured she got to that question. Okay. Did you get that one right? Venerable?
Yeah, good martial arts.
You put it's the two bodhicittas. Right? What are the two bodhicittas?
Conventional and ultimate.
Okay.
Regular and extra special.
Regular and extra special. Rocky road. And 9, the method of generating bodhicitta for those of great faculties is the 7 methods of cause and result, equalization and exchange of self and others, generation stage of highest yoga tantra, looks like 2 tantras there, or yamantaka. Right.
What is it?
The equalization and exchange of self and others. Okay. 10, true or false? Bodhicitta is a mental factor. Whoa.
I wasn't sure I was
Didn't we talk about saying? Bodhicitta is a special primary mind. It's accompanied by the aspiration for enlightenment and caused by, which is a mental factor, and preceded by the aspiration to free sentient beings from suffering, great compassion, but it itself is not a mental factor. Okay, Dorje, see?
That was something good.
11, the wisdom realizing emptiness is a mental factor. The wisdom realizing emptiness is a mental factor. Whoa, interesting. Wisdom itself is prajna. When we talk the wisdom realizing emptiness, we usually call about the particular kind of prajna. And when it's perfected, the prajna paramita, it's a mental factor in general.
Those were Thursday night questions.
No. 12. Hinayana arhats abandon self-cherishing but not self-grasping. True or false?
False. There are hots, right?
Yeah, Hinayana arhats, Dorji says, they abandoned self-cherishing but did not abandon self-grasping. That's actually false. They abandoned self-grasping but not self-cherishing. Okay. Then 13. Bodhisattvas abandon self-cherishing but not self-grasping.
But they weren't.
Who said true?
I said true.
Well, I said true because when they first realized
They haven't
bodhicitta, they haven't
necessarily
realized
emptiness,
emptiness
but
yet.
they
So
have that.
it depends on how you read the word.
Well,
Ambiguous question.
What bhumi are they on?
if you say bodhisattvas abandon self-cherishing, are there some bodhisattvas who have abandoned self-cherishing but not self-grasping? Yes. Are there some bodhisattvas who have abandoned self-cherishing and abandoned self-grasping? Yes. So you have to say false. Okay. So how did we do? Who got all them right? Anyone get them all right? Who got 10 out of 13? Good. You got more than 10? Anyone get 11? 12? You got 12? You got 11. 12, Mani? Good girl. Dorji?
11.
Really? Okay, you got 2. Okay. And who got more than 8 right? There. No, you can't count twice. Okay.
It's a literal.
And anyone get less than 3? Okay, you passed. Okay, good. So for next class, if you could do these last 7 questions at your leisure, within 1 hour on another sheet of paper. Are you listening, Diana? Mm-hmm. So this is you can read them once now, if you want. But then, and if you want, you can study a little bit. But then, when you're actually writing them down, you can't look at any book. Okay? Does that sound fair? Does that make sense? You can take a look at them now and say, I better know that section. But then don't keep on looking at the questions while you're studying. Okay? And so that will be this is kind of our midterm exam or a quiz or something like that. What do you think? Was that hard? Self-cherishing, self-grasping? What's the difference between self-cherishing and self-grasping? Are they the same thing? What's the difference? What is the difference?
So self-grasping has to do with emptiness, and self-cherishing has to do with the ego.
Self-grasping has to do with emptiness. That's a little bit unclear to me. Self-grasping has to do with emptiness? Doesn't everything have to do with emptiness? Self-grasping has to do with
Viewing your aggregates as being, rising from their own side. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a self to grasp.
it has to do with the opposite of understanding emptiness, doesn't it? It has to do with the ignorance, grasping that yourself or your aggregates, phenomena in general, have some kind of mode of existence that's findable, like a self, like an atma. And self-cherishing, what is self-cherishing done? Putting yourself first.
Taking care of number one.
Taking care of number one. Did anyone see the finale of Survivor last night?
Oh,
Oh, jeez.
that was so dis.
We were all studying.
You were all studying? That's, do you know what, Theo, do you know what Survivor is? It's the TV program that kind of epitomizes self-cherishing thought and self-grasping. And they were praising some of the people because they were, they were survivors. And actually, the survivor instinct, it was very interesting if you think about it. What is the survivor instinct of those people? It involved sometimes pretending to be honest so you'd be voted at the end. You wouldn't have made any enemies, but your real purpose, you did cheat a little bit in order to get ahead, but you wanted to get that $1 million at the end. You wanted to survive for yourself. So that's quite interesting, self-cherishing fun. So the subject of the text that we're studying is called the mind training, the training of the mind, lojong, the Tibetans say. And it has to do with developing these two understandings, what we call the two bodhicittas. Conventional bodhicitta, how to develop in everyday life. Not only of course we have to know formally how to develop it, but how to carry on that, carry over that practice of developing conventional bodhicitta in everyday life, and how to develop ultimate bodhicitta, that is the wisdom that realizes emptiness. So mainly, there have been many different methods here in many of the verses to recognize the shortcomings of self-cherishing, right? And self-grasping. Because what do they impel us to do? Create negative karma, which then have repercussions upon us, like a wheel, like a boomerang, a wheel of sharp weapons that we create. We sort of shot off this thing by creating negative actions out of self-cherishing, out of ego grasping, and that always comes back to us. Now, what about virtuous karma? I forgot your name in the red shirt. What's your name? Carl. What about virtuous karma? Isn't that still due to ego grasping or no? When we create virtuous karma, ordinary beings like ourselves in samsara, is that something moments in which we are not overcome by self-grasping?
No, I think it's a selflessness that creates the body.
Creates virtuous karma. Only when you have a moment of egolessness can you create virtuous karma.
Do you mean self-cherishing because you're saying self-grasping?
I'm saying self-grasping, right? I mean self-grasping here. Can you create virtuous karma, Elaine, when self-grasping is present in the mind? Or would you even accept that for us, almost all the virtuous karma that we create is necessarily created accompanied by self-grasping? How could that be? If self-grasping is self-grasping a negative mental factor? What do you think, Bonnie? Is self-grasping non-virtuous? ultimately nothing exists. What do you mean nothing ultimately exists? Ultimately,
But if we waited until our motivation was pure, we would never be able to create anything from.
so what do you think? Is that problematic? Is that paradoxical?
Think about the fly going around the stupa. Didn't have any,
Mhm.
great motivation for that, but
Mhm.
yet he created positive karma.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Zia?
I think it seems like it's paradoxical, but when we begin anything that is new, and what I've heard is that we play act, we sometimes pretend, but with the long-term motivation, I want to do this goal. And so I think the self-grasping is that way as well. But then along the way, we realize the rest of the self-grasping and gravitate toward the.
Let me ask you this. Do we eliminate any self-grasping before the bodhisattva? Let's say if we're talking about bodhisattva, does the bodhisattva eliminate any self-grasping before the path of seeing?
Not really, but you create the causes.
You know what the path of seeing means?
Seeing emptiness.
Right? When you have direct realization of emptiness, you see as though, it's not with your eyes, as though with your mental consciousness. It's so called seeing because in a sense, because seeing is the analog of direct perception, right? Seeing it with your mental consciousness without the means of a mental image. Before that point, it's a long time on the bodhisattva path, we haven't eliminated any self-grasping. Don't we create any virtue before that? Okay, we may not have eliminated self-grasping. Okay, we may not have eliminated self-grasping, but you might say, well, although it might be still there, you might think virtuous karma is only created when you have moments of, what did Carl say, selflessness, did you say? Or someone saying selfless moments? It's not like that. Ordinary karma that we create, virtue, is called contaminated virtue. It's contaminated with grasping to true existence. So uncontaminated virtue is only created when someone has an actual wisdom that perceives the non-true existence of phenomena. So even the virtue we create is contaminated. That's why even the virtue we create in general is going to be a cause, in general, because of perpetuating our samsaric existence. It will be the cause of relief or happiness in samsara, or rebirth in the upper realms, let's say, if it's very strong throwing karma. Right? How could it become a cause? How can we dedicate it to enlightenment then? Can it become a cause of enlightenment? Because enlightenment is an uncontaminated phenomena. The karma that we're creating now is contaminated. Contaminated means here with the ignorance grasping to true existence. Do you follow, Venerable?
If you do it in connection with holy objects, dedicating in connection with holy objects, that would increase the power of that contaminated, it's still a contaminated virtue.
It would get even more contaminated, right?
It'll increase the powerful virtue, the power of the virtue of that still contaminated virtue, but it'll increase its power, so it seems like you're just going in a gradual process. The power of your virtue, perhaps through time, the virtuous karma you create becomes less contaminated as your attachment, your delusion and your desires diminish as you go on and on through the path. So eventually your virtue becomes pure as you get closer to the realization of seeing emptiness. So it seems like the contamination will decrease and the power of the purity and the virtue of that karma will increase. Sounds good.
So what we create now is still under the influence of self-grasping. Even the so-called, what we might think of as selfless moments, it might be at those moments that we're quite free of self-cherishing. What do you think, Carl? When you were saying moments of I can't remember the word you used, something like selfless instances. Like maybe we're more at those moments. We might still be grasping to a self of persons, and that this is a real action that we're doing and so forth, because we don't have an insight into emptiness. But it may be that we can overcome to a certain degree through the force of seeing the disadvantages, actually going against the grain of our self-cherishing thought. Maybe there are mercy and compassion and friendliness can overcome that for some time. So something to think about. Okay. Yeah, done.
Creating uncontaminated virtuous karma, does that happen right at the path of seeing, or do you need to reach like the 10th bhumi before it really is uncontaminated? You still have some self-grasping involved for a while, right?
Right, I think, what do you think? You think you only create uncontaminated virtue when you reach, what, the 7th, the 8th bhumi?
Somewhere up there, I don't know where.
The 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis are when the bodhisattva is like a Hinayana arhat in that they have eliminated all of the klesha, all of the delusions, all of the self-grasping.
7th, 8th,
8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, that they call the pure bhumis. So the first 7 bhumis are called the impure bhumis, because they're still, bodhisattva is still contaminated with some remnants of self-grasping. But as Venerable said, it's decreasing all the time. In fact, it's decreasing up until the self-grasping, is becoming less strong up until the path of seeing, because one is developing more and more understanding, maybe through understanding emptiness, through a mental image of that. And then in the path of seeing, when one realizes that directly, some self-grasping is abandoned completely so that it will never come back, what's called the intellectually formed self-grasping, so that it will never come back. And then that more and more intellectually innate forms of self-grasping are abandoned on the impure bhumis. And then on the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, the bodhisattvas mainly are eliminating the obstructions to omniscience. The way that they're able to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience, because they've already eliminated the obstructions to liberation, which are the klesha. Okay, on the 8th bhumi, beginning of the 8th bhumi. So the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, they're eliminating still what are called the shedib, the obstructions to omniscience. And the way that they're able to do that is not through emptiness alone, realization of emptiness alone, but through a combination of realization of emptiness supported by that great altruistic wish to work for the welfare of sentient beings, conventional bodhicitta. That's why the bodhisattvas take at the beginning conventional bodhicitta as their main object of practice, because it's like, I'm thinking how the teenagers talk today. It's like, hey man, it's like, even if you have the wisdom of emptiness, like as the Hinayana arhats have, without bodhicitta, that wisdom of emptiness alone cannot eliminate the obstructions to omniscience. It can only eliminate the klesha, the self-grasping, the ignorance, the anger, and so forth. One could attain nirvana. And at that point, if one never cultivated bodhicitta beforehand, at that point the self-cherishing, which was still going to be present if one hadn't developed bodhicitta, will carry one on to stay on the Hinayana path and attain nirvana rather than work for enlightenment. So the bodhisattvas try to develop, they do develop bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta first, so that on those, at the time that they have eliminated all the obstructions from the mind, they still have the tendency to work for the welfare of sentient beings, and now they're eliminating the subtle obstructions to omniscience. So this text is talking a lot about karma. Karma is talking about the manifestation of the conventional level of truth, right? And how one can use that understanding on the conventional level to motivate oneself to transform the adverse conditions into the path. Do you know what that means, to transform adverse conditions in the path? If you don't know, Carl, you don't know? Do you know what it means to transform adverse conditions in the path? I forgot your name in the path.
Me?
You.
God, if I knew, I wouldn't be here. You know, I mean, if I knew all this, I wouldn't come.
Right. Well, no, I mean, you might have some idea. I mean,
Huh?
to transform adverse conditions into the path. That's kind of
I
like.
mean, I have like an everyday practical.
Okay, now what would that mean? Like in the Lojong, the training of the mind, what does it mean to transform adverse conditions into the path?
Well, my everyday life, I use them to practice, so like, I had a problem with one of my neighbors, and I just thought, well, it was really unbelievable what happened. And I just had to, be have some compassion for him. I had to get, I used it as an opportunity to practice, not to get into my anger, not to get into my attachment that he drove through the middle of my brand new rock garden. Which he did. And
brand new rock garden.
just kind of go, wow, if I'm so attached to this rock Zen garden that I just built, how am I going to give up this precious little life?
Wow, that's very good. Excellent.
Yeah, so
Good,
that's
good example.
kind
Yeah. Transforming adverse conditions into the path. It's said that in a time like this, there are more adverse conditions than propitious conditions, than beneficial conditions, right? So if the adverse conditions become big obstacles to our practice, that we'll be stymied. So the Lojong teachings, one of the things they do is particular methods, how to transform what looks like, on one hand, an adverse condition into something that's beneficial for your practice. And as you said, there are different ways of doing it. One of the main ways that is mentioned many times is by recognizing this, when bad things happen, recognizing it as the depletion of your negative karma, and actually rejoice about that, rather than getting upset. Usually we want everything to go right. We want, what's it say? I never promised you a rose garden, We think life promised us a rose garden. Pardon? No. Or in your case, a rock garden, yeah.
A rock garden.
Yeah. Life never promised you a rock garden. What's your first name again? I forgot.
It's Michelle.
Michelle. No, Michelle. Life didn't promise you a rock garden.
Michelle Maybell.
Michelle Maybell,
Right.
the rock garden queen.
The rock
Okay.
garden. Not a Tibetan rock garden.
Not the rock queen, the rock garden queen. So, so one way is to see that. Also to use that to recognize it as the wheel of sharp weapons coming back to us for things that we have done. And so to put the onus on the self-cherishing thought and the self-grasping.
Yes.
Especially in the Lojong, the self-cherishing thought, to put the fault on that. Because we're trying as proto-bodhisattvas to try to develop bodhicitta. So instead of blaming the other person, to blame the self-cherishing thought, just as you said.
Very difficult.
It's very difficult to blame the self-cherishing thought.
It is an opportunity to practice, but I find it at times difficult. And the better I get at one practice, then something comes like this, unexpected, and it becomes more difficult.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good. That's excellent. Then there's some challenge. If it was all, it's said that to keep one vow today in this degenerate age is more, for one day, is more meritorious than to keep all the vows of a fully ordained nun or monk in the time of the Buddha for an entire life. Because there are many more adverse conditions. So if you think in that way, you recognize when things are adverse, actually it gives you more an opportunity to create virtuous karma. And what the efforts that we do put in have greater results. So your rock garden, if it were the time of the Buddha, you would have not, you wouldn't have been so attached to your rock garden, and
I did go out and rake it and said a lot of Om Mani Padme Hum.
Oh, Mani Padme. Okay. Those are good ones. Okay.
Well, if it's the time of the Buddha, I wouldn't be here.
So transforming adverse conditions into the path is one of the special methods of the training of the mind. And that's some of the things that we're talking about. So these verses point out again and again karmic connections, so that you can meditate on karma also, to recognize that it's not just due to the outer condition, other person, that some garbage has happened, but because of our own karma. So there's many, many different elements that are being talked about here. Also the wisdom of emptiness, to see through these various events, to see them as empty. If they were not empty of true existence, the garbage that happens to us, if they were not empty of true existence, there'd be no way to transform them into the path. They would just be bad, bad things happen. People would just have to feel sorry for you. Oh, poor Milarepa doesn't have any clothes, doesn't have any food. People, came to him and commiserated. I think his sister came, or his cousin or someone. He said, you're the one who's suffering. I'm not suffering. You think these are bad conditions. You have the bad conditions. So if they were truly existent, if these adverse conditions were truly existent, there'd be no way to transform them. They would exist as unfortunate or bad. But the fact is, anything that we think of at first as bad or suffering, because it is not truly existent, we can understand that in a different way with our wisdom. We can transform that into something beneficial. When it was a famous American saying, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, Or if someone dumps excrement on your front lawn, instead of saying, oh, excrement, you can say,
Yummy, yummy.
you can say,
Very advanced fertilizer.
fertilizer, right. You can recognize it as fertilizer. Beth.
I was really wondering about guilt and this lame thing. It seems like there's some kind of fine feeling there as far as, how deep does that go, dealing with this cancer,
Mhm.
So I had this cancer because I killed all these people in the past, and all these different things that I've tried to heal haven't worked, and it keeps going on and on and on, so it's like, well, it's all my fault, I did all these horrible things, and I'm just saying,
It's
on an
not your
emotional
fault.
level,
Yeah,
there's this
it's
thing about guilt and
one has to be very skillful and clear not to fall into a sense of guilt, because guilt, from my understanding, my perception of it, guilt is a mind in which you are perceiving a self which doesn't really exist. Ignorance is grasping to it, and you're somehow feeling that is truly bad, exacerbating the problem, making it worse. We mentioned this before. When you've created negative karma, either now or in the past, instead of feeling guilt about it, as though it had to be, only thing that could be absolved, is that the right term? Absolved by some higher power? It's not like that. One has to recognize it as though one had ingested poison. Instead of feeling guilt, if you ingested poison, would you feel guilty if you accidentally took some poison? No, you'd feel regret. Ooh, I shouldn't have done that. And that regret then would fuel your energy for the future to try to get rid of that. Our lives are infinite within cyclic existence if we don't put an end to it. It's not a case that this is the only life we're going to live. But in this lifetime, depending on how we practice, we can actually purify the causes of unfortunate rebirths in the future. Even a person whose life looks to be, from the point of view of Bill Gates, or from the point of view of, I don't know, just ordinary worldly views, say, oh, nothing special. That person might, because of their mind training, they may actually be creating the causes to be born a human in the next life. Again, to meet the Dharma, to meet holy gurus, and to be guided further along the path. And people that are, in very high positions, or full of themselves, or supposed authorities or whatever, they may themselves be under the influence of self-cherishing and self-grasping and never, because of their position and their pride and so forth, and never practice. So there's no, even if someone is very supposedly healthy, if someone were healthy, would that make them a better person? What could we say about them? Well, we could rejoice. We could say, wow, right now they're experiencing the fruits of their past lives when they didn't create the causes of illness and so forth. It doesn't make that person a better person, because they have seeds on their mind stream to experience all sorts of suffering in the future when the right conditions arise. So if we're experiencing some causes of suffering now, that doesn't mean that we will always experience those causes of suffering. It's possible that we can purify them now, or it's possible that we can diminish them so much that in the future there will be huge roadblocks taken out of our spiritual path.
I never understand that story about the poison and the regret very well, because it seems like if you've taken it, it's too late to start feeling regret. You can't change that particular karmic life.
Well, when would you feel regret? Before taking it?
Well, the story is that you feel regret after taking it when you see the results happen.
Well, do you understand what a mind of regret means? Remorse. It's a mind that is observing something, let's say if we're talking about non-virtue, observing something that was non-virtuous, and a mind that is thinking, I shouldn't have done that. Or seeing the result of something that's non-virtuous, even if we don't remember doing the non-virtuous action, and realizing that we must have created non-virtue in the past and feeling some remorse about that. I shouldn't, I've created this in the past. Then sometimes impelled by that, developing a determination not to create that kind of action in the future. So remorse can't come before the action, can it? You were saying, when you were thinking about this little kind of analogy of eating poison, consuming poison, ingesting poison, and as a result of that, when you start to recognize that you've ingested poison, knowing that there will be consequences of that, either you begin to get the consequences now, or you've learned that you've been ingesting lead or some poisonous thing, or what are these things they put in our water and everything, and you recognize that there will be some long-term effects of that. So you regret that, and as a result of that, that kind of mind is one in which that is a fundamental basis then for also not doing it again, obviously, right, as a basis. Regretting, seeing what you've done is detrimental. But that state of mind in terms of karma is different than just regretting having ingested poison, because regretting the non-virtuous actions we've done is the opposite of rejoicing. Rejoicing in our negative actions is what makes them stronger. In fact, rejoicing in our virtue is what makes them stronger, right? Do you know that? Rejoicing in virtue. So, the opposite of rejoicing is to feel some regret or remorse, some mind that feels hesitancy, thinking, I shouldn't have done that. That itself diminishes the power of the karma. That alone is not going to purify it completely, but that's one of the four opponent forces, right? Do you know what the four opponent forces are when we talk about to purify negative karma? So regret, not guilt, guilt is not going to purify our negative karma, but a feeling of regret or remorse will, along with the other factors, act to be able to purify negative karma completely. Because that's a mind that's the opposite of rejoicing about the negative things we've done. It's a mind that seriously thinks about the fact that we've created negative karma. We've ingested poison, so to speak, and feels uncomfortable about it, not happy about it. Otherwise, people that are taking heroin or poison or something, they just, oh yeah, it's great. they're rejoicing about it, it's not gonna be beneficial, right? Okay. So just before we take a break, let's just mention I think we got up through 50 last time, no? Verse 50? So I'll just read the 51st one here. 51 says, O king of spells, who torments the enemy. Who's the king of spells? Probably Yamantaka. Huh? Who torments the enemy. Summon that vow breaker who is destroying me and others. That savage called ego clinging. The sly one, or the enchanter. What else do they call it? The bewitcher. Who, brandishing the weapon of action, runs uncontrollably through the jungle of cyclic existence. So this is, again, as in the previous verses, is calling upon, bringing up the specter of Yamantaka, the wisdom that realizes emptiness, the wrathful aspect, and reminding ourselves that the real enemy is not the outer enemy, but the real enemy is who Yamantaka wants to kill, wants to slay. The real Yama is our self-grasping and self-cherishing. Here he's talking about ego-clinging, ego-grasping, self-grasping. The enchanter, the siren, who, brandishing the weapon of action, what's that? The weapon of karma, runs uncontrollably through the jungle of cyclic existence. It sounds like one of these Arnold Schwarzenegger movies or something. So let's take a little break. You've taken your midterm exam. Now you need some time to feel regret or rejoice and have a cup of tea.
What is it meant to
No, no, you didn't do anything, huh? It's my karma. Okay. So how are we doing? So, the self-grasping is what causes us to continue within cyclic existence. So this is what verse 51 is talking about. Verse 52. Call him. Actually, gukchik in Tibetan kind of means summon. Wrathful Yamantaka. Beat. Pierce the heart of the enemy. Ego. Dadak, the self. Pierce the heart. Here it says, roar and thunder on the head of the destroyer, false construction. I think that comes again later, eh? Does it come again? Roar and thunder on the head of the false destroyer. Roar and thunder, I'm not quite sure. That particular verse, that refrain is going to come later, many, many times. Let me see. Trample them. Roar and thunder on the head. Here, roar and thunder, chem se chem, it can mean like dance on the head. How does it say? Capture. Trample him, dance on the head of this treacherous concept of selfish concern. Tear out the heart of this self-centered butcher who slaughters our chance to gain final release. To me that sounds, not only is it more poetic, it's a little clearer, closer to the meaning, I think. This is the actual, when we talk about Yamantaka, the wrathful deity, this is kind of the meaning of that wrathful deity. What Yamantaka is showing wrath about is not other beings, the enemies, like that we would invoke Yamataka to get rid of the terrorists or something like that, or your enemies, but Yamataka is invoked to remind us of the self-cherishing thought. This is the real enemy. This is what's caused our bad health or our ill luck, or not finding friends, not finding success, and so forth. 53. Hum, O great tutelary deity, produce your miraculous apparitions. Ja. Here it says za. In Sanskrit, ja is sort of like a syllable that means come. Ja. Bind the enemy tightly. Pat. I beseech you to release me from all fetters. Shik. I beseech you to cut the knot of clinging. So this is, this is invoking the imagery of Yamataka in the practice of Tantra. And again, sometimes people practice different kinds of protectors. Do you know what protectors are, Dharma protectors? You might think that Yamataka is almost like that you would invoke Yamataka to eliminate your enemies or something like that. But that's not the purpose of Dharma protectors in general. In some cases, it is. But the Dharma protectors also, at the beginning of the path, we pray to them to bring more suffering upon us at a certain point, when your mind is very strong, rather than praying for them to free us from suffering. What do you think? Would that be possible? Trample the rock garden?
I think it's possible, but I'm so not there.
Yeah. Well, that's what... I'm still not there also, but it's the...
No more suffering for me.
Usually, do you like to have enemies? Is that something you pray to find more enemies? Right now, we would, at the beginning stage, we pray to be free of enemies, right? Have friends, worldly people. But the bodhisattvas actually pray to encounter enemies, because it's at their level, when it's rare to find someone, when the karma is very pure, it's very rare to find people that will harm one without any cause. So the bodhisattvas cherish the enemy like a precious treasure. You know the verses in the mind training. When others out of envy or jealousy abuse or insult me, I'll accept their harsh words and give the victory to others. When someone I have benefited in whom I have great hopes give me great terrible harm, I will practice to see them as my holy guru. Those verses. Also, what's the one I'm thinking of? The one before that?
When out of any envy others mistreat me with abuse, insults, or the like, I shall accept defeat and offer the victory to others.
One of you people who have pleasant character.
Oh, when someone whom I have benefited and in whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm, I shall regard that person as my holy guru.
Is that the one I'm talking about?
The one before those?
What was it? What was I just saying?
You said those two.
You said those two, the one before.
Yeah, no, I know that, but I was saying, what was I talking about? What was the subject?
The fact that you want to pray for somebody.
Yeah. We practice to see something as a precious treasure. What's the verse?
Whenever I see beings who are wicked in nature and overwhelmed by violent negative actions and suffering, I shall hold such rare ones dear as if I had found a precious treasure.
So that means when we find others, like enemies, that are problematic for us because maybe we don't even want to look at them because they're in such great suffering, they're crazy, or they're causing problems for us or others. Our general tendency is to want to be free of them, but the Bodhisattva practices to try to see them as a treasure, something very, very rare, like Atisha's cook. Remember Atisha's cook? You know the story? Do you remember the story of Atisha's cook?
Vaguely.
Atisha's cook was the one that was so problematic and so much trouble that the other disciples asked Atisha, oh Lord, please get rid of this cook. Send him away. He's he's just a problem for everyone. And Atisha looked very surprised, and he said, well, with whom would I practice patience? Because if everyone is very kind to you, there's no chance to practice patience. If there's no problems in our life, there's no way to practice. But you remember the end of that, when Atisha, after some years, Atisha said, having met the Tibetans, I no longer need the cook. It was not one of my personal teachers, but I'm not sure I ever met him. Geshe Jumpel, I think it was Jumpel Senge in Italy. At first, he was extolling how forthright the Italians were, because he was used to Tibetans who were they would never speak their mind to the Lama. They would always be very circumspect and very respectful. And the Italian, well, we're all like this, but Italians can be a bit voluble and loud, and he said at first he found this very refreshing because he saw that they were, that was something so unusual. Then later he recognized it wasn't so beneficial because they were very difficult to teach, and people just keep their own mindsets. To express your own ideas is one thing, but just to really believe in them and not listen to the teachings is another thing. So we're calling on Yamataka not here to eliminate the outer problems or the outer enemies, but to eliminate our self-grasping, the cause of them. This kind of thinking, I think, can even be more more of a purification. 54. Come here, approach, great tutelary deity Yamataka. I beseech you at this very moment to rip to shreds this leather sack of actions and the 5 poisonous afflictions that mire me in the mud of worldly action. What are the 5 poisonous afflictions? Do you know the 5? What was he talking about? Ignorance. 3 poisons, but here it says the 3 plus 10. So ignorance, attachment, and anger. And what else? Pride and jealousy. Maybe in Tantra, maybe you would say pride and jealousy, but when we talk about in the sutra, when we talk about the 6 root delusions, one of them being afflicted view, it's jealousy is not one of these root ones. But here, maybe because of the tantric connection, maybe it's talking about the 5 that you just mentioned. So pride, the other 2 being pride and jealousy. So they're related with transforming different aspects of our being, the different energies in our chakras and so forth. Well, in the sutra tradition, when we talk about the 6 root afflictions, the 6 klesha, right? They're ignorance, attachment, anger, pride, and doubt, afflicted doubt. Those are 5. And then afflicted view, the 6th. But here, when it talks about 5, maybe it's talking about it from the point of view of Tantra, in which case it's talking about the transformation of our 5 aggregates and into the 5 Buddha families and so forth.
George, could you just tell us what the difference between ignorance and afflicted view are? The differences.
In this, I'll give you the short answer, and the long answer will be in the next course after the summer, the mind and mental factors. We'll talk a lot about that. In the Mahayana presentation of the mind and mental factors, there are 2 things that are alternately considered to be the root of cyclic existence. One of them is what we call avidya. Do you know that word, avidya? Avidya is a Sanskrit word that means ignorance. not knowing. Vidya means knowing, right? Like the Vedas, that which is knowledge. Avidya means not knowing, or in Tibetan we say marigpa. That's usually considered to be, that's one of the 6 root delusions, 6 root klesha, that's considered by Nagarjuna, for instance, to be the root of cyclic existence. That's talking about the ignorance, not just not knowing. Oh, I don't know. You know, was it? I'm trying to think of some song. Don't know much about arithmetic or something. Was it? How's it go?
George's song or the
Don't know much about, emptiness. Yeah, there we go. It's not talking about this kind of ignorance of not knowing about arithmetic or Microsoft Word or the stock market or how to make crepe Suzette or something like that. It's not talking about the ignorance of how to get along with people, like in Survivor, how to be clever, how to. What it's talking about is this avidya or marigma, that's the root of cyclic existence, means a misdirected wisdom. It's not just not knowing something; it's looking in the wrong way, looking at things and believing them to exist the way that they appear due to our contaminated karma, due to the obstructions to omniscience. Phenomena appear to us as truly existent. The self appears as though it were truly existent, existing from its own side, and we grasp to that. All of this grasping falls under the category of ignorance, the ignorance of true existence. In other words, the ignorance grasping to true existence of all phenomena. When we talk about the 6 afflictions, the 6 root afflictions, one of them being afflicted views, the main afflicted view, the fundamental one, is what's called the wrong view of the changeable collection or the transitory collection. The view of the transitory collection. You can say wrong view, but it's the view of the transitory collection. Jiksok latawa. What that means is, from a prasangika point of view, from the upper tenets point of view, it means referring to your own self, which does exist conventionally. There is a body, say. There is a George, not the one that I conceive of, but the one that's merely imputed upon my body and mind, conceptually and conventionally existent. That's the only George that we can talk about, as a matter of fact, that does exist. I mean, we could talk about other Georges, but the other Georges, truly existent George, doesn't exist. It's just a figment of my imagination. The only George that does exist is the George that's imputed upon my body and mind. So referring to that as its referent object, those of you who are taking Lorig, that's the referent object, and conceiving it as truly existent, that's called the wrong view of the transitory collection. That's the main afflicted view. Chandrakirti and other scholars said that was the root of cyclic existence, not the ignorance of grasping other phenomena, but the ignorance grasping the self. Actually, it's kind of a subset of that, isn't it? Because you're grasping the self as truly existent. It's one little part of grasping, sometimes grasping at true existence is not that small. Grasping at true existence, huge, we grasp at everything as truly existent. But amongst those things, there's some things we're grasping to our own self as truly existent, not to other person's self, but to our own self. That particular subset of ignorance is called the wrong view of the transitory, or the view of the transitory collection, afflicted view of the transitory collection. And Chandrakirti and other great pundits said that was the root of cyclic existence. So then then you have to think, well, is one of them right? Is Chandrakirti right and Nagarjuna wrong? Or is Nagarjuna right and Chandrakirti wrong? They're both the root of cyclic existence. It's just a different way. Fundamentally, what comes, what instigates all of our delusions is grasping to our own self. But if we grasp, say for instance, if we thought we didn't grasp to the self, but we were grasping to a self of other phenomena, there's no way that we would have realized the real emptiness of the self. Because once you've realized the emptiness of the self-identity, that same reasoning can be easily, effortlessly applied to all other phenomena. It's something that you have to actually, I understand, you have to actually taste in order to see the truth of that. So, here we're talking about the self-grasping. There's two different selves. There's a self of persons and a self of phenomena. So when we say self-grasping, it can mean grasping this general ignorance, grasping to all phenomena as truly existent, or it can be in a more limited sense, just grasping to your own self-identity. It's said that in the stages of realization of emptiness, the yogi or yogini first realizes the emptiness of the self, of their own identity. That's the first taste that they have of emptiness. And then they can apply that actual reasoning to other phenomena. It may seem like you can understand the emptiness of other phenomena first. It's said that there's really no difference in subtlety, but in actual practice, that which is most intimate to you, that causes the most immediate problem, is the self of persons, your own, the appearance of a self to your own mind. Does that make sense? You know, when we do our meditation, our motivation at the beginning, sometimes we try to look at how the self is appearing, as though it's existing there somewhere, a real self, not just a name given to our body and mind. And our mind grasps to that. It's when you have some understanding that counteracts that ignorance, that sees that self, not just letting go of it as we're doing in our meditation, but actually through logic, developing an inferential cognition that doesn't exist at all, the way that it appears, developing certainty of that, realizing that through inference, say, through a mental image. That counters that ignorance that's grasping to it. The ignorance that's a misdirected wisdom. It's actually looking at something and believing it exists. Anyway, it's a complicated subject, but maybe some of you have studied before, so you know some of that. So, 55. Although it has brought me suffering in the three wretched states of existence, not knowing enough to fear it, I rush to its cause. Oh, here's this refrain again. Roar and thunder on the head of the destroyer. This is the verse that I was saying, that trample on the head. When it says Chemse Chem in Tibetan, it takes roar and thunder. It also means a kind of dance on the head of the destroyer. You know, pounce on it, of false construction. What does that mean? How does they translate? They don't translate false construction. Pardon?
False self-cherishing.
Treacherous concept of selfish concern. Trample him, dance on the head of this treacherous concept of selfish concern. Here the word false conception, the Tibetan doesn't actually say false conception. Here, they're calling it treacherous concept. And the translation that came from Dharamsala. Here the Tibetan actually says, Pumche tokpe gola chemse chem. So it's kind of dance on the head of conceptualization, that which brings defeat. Pumche, that which brings, all misfortune. This conception of a truly existent self. Dance on its head. Tear out the heart, destroy the heart of the slayer, the enemy of the self. That's the thing that Yamantaka is wrathful about, not the outer enemies. 56. And so now it comes, many of these verses now, for a long sequence now, have the same refrain. There it says, roar and thunder on the head of the destroyer, false construction. Mortally strike at the heart of the butcher, the enemy, ego. So another, if you like, another way to say that is trample him, dance on the head, instead of saying roar and thunder. You say trample, or, sort of dance on the head of this treacherous concept, where it says here, false construction. There's no word false in the sentence. Here is also the word treacherous is kind of implied, of this treacherous concept of selfish concern. Treacherous, I think, maybe is understood from the word pungche, that means something that brings us defeat, brings us into ruin, the ruinous concept of selfish concern. Tear out the heart of this self-centered butcher who slaughters our chance to gain final release. That's maybe a more poetic way of putting it, the same refrain that comes each time. Then 57, although that which I desire is near at hand, my effort to achieve it is small. What is desired is near. My effort to achieve it is small. Although my projects are many, none of them are completed. Does that sound familiar? So what does it mean? Although that which I desire is near at hand, my effort to achieve it is small. What do you think that's talking about?
Liberation.
Pardon?
Liberation.
Liberation is near at hand?
Yeah, it's probably quite close, but we don't put any effort to really get there, or to understand freedom from suffering.
Maybe. What do you think? What about our happiness and cyclic existence? Usually, our happiness, we don't put effort in actually finding happiness and cyclic existence. We think we do. We put effort into, we want to find happiness, but we actually destroy the causes of happiness, create the causes of suffering. Here, Geshe Sopa said for this one, this verse is similar to the last one, that is 56. 56. Did I skip 56?
Yeah.
Oh, I skipped 56. Sorry.
The translation between the Wheel of Sharp Weapons and this one, verses 52 and 53 are one.
Right.
So when you
You at a certain
switch,
point, at a certain point, the numbers get out of whack for a couple of reasons. So let me go back to 56 here. Although my desire for comfort is great, or in other words, I have great desire for ease, things to go as I wish. But that's how I want things. I want things to go well, but I don't accumulate the causes of that. Although my tolerance for suffering is small, I don't want to have any kind of suffering. I want everything good. I want to be comfortable and at ease, but I don't create the causes of it. On the other hand, I want to be free of suffering. I have little tolerance for suffering, but my desires are voracious. Here says, my desire and greed are great. So what is the cause of that? This is the ego grasping, that the ignorance that is the main creator of this. Also subsidiary is our ignorance of karma, isn't it? Not understanding what the cause of happiness is and so forth. Let me just read these two verses, 56 and 57, what Geshe Soba said. So this one said, although my desire for comfort is great, I have great desire for ease, I don't accumulate the causes. Although my tolerance for suffering is small, my desires are voracious. And the next verse, 57, that I spoke a minute ago, although that which I desire is near at hand, my effort to achieve it is small. Although my projects are many, none of them are completed. Let me just read you what Geshe said about this. So the first one, 56. All of us want to accomplish things quickly and with little effort, whether in religious, business, or personal endeavors. We do not want to undergo any hardship, and we expect to achieve our objectives effortlessly. When we do not get what we want, it is because of our self-cherishing attitude. It is because our self-cherishing attitude kept us from doing what was needed to achieve it. Could that mean in the past or in the present? If we don't get what we want, is that the fault of our present self-cherishing thought? Could be? Okay, could be. But in general, say, I wanted to win the lottery, or I wanted to find a particular friend, or I wanted to do something that doesn't work. Is that the result of my present self-cherishing thought?
No.
Was it the result of?
Previous self-cherishing.
So previous karma ripening now, and that karma was instigated by our past self-cherishing thought. So it's very useful to think in terms of those three times. Self-cherishing thought has been a problem in the past for me because it's caused me to create negative karma which is ripening on me now. My present self-cherishing thought makes the present manifestation unbearable. If I didn't have the present self-cherishing thought, no matter what ruin or bad health or bad luck came, it wouldn't be affecting me in this way. The future self-cherishing thought, if I don't cut the continuity, as I can see this, it's going to continue to cause me to circle in cyclic existence. So starting to understand the defects of self-cherishing thought, self-grasping, self-cherishing thought as the real enemy, more and more in all of its manifestations. Then 57, although that which I desire is near at hand. This verse is similar to the last one. We desire to have continual happiness, peace, pleasure, and wealth. All the good things we have in this life come from our past actions. If we didn't earn the necessary merit in our past lives, we won't obtain anything positive in this life. Does that make any sense? We won't obtain anything positive means what? We won't have good luck because we didn't create the causes of it in the past. There's no way that you can experience a result without having created the cause, right? That's one of the other kind of factors involved in mind training, understanding about karma. If I want to be happy, I've got to start to change my ways. I've got to create the causes of happiness. If I want to be loved, I've got to love others. I've got to create the cause to be loved. So this can instigate us to actually to practice in a positive way, but in terms of conventionality, in terms of karma. If we didn't earn the necessary merit in our past lives, we won't obtain anything positive in this life. Yet we are ruthless in pursuit of the good life. That was how either Geshe or they retranslated. Here this was saying, although my projects are many, none of them are completed. I say, although that which I desire is near at hand, my effort to achieve them is small. Although my projects are many, none of them are completed. Am I reading the right one? Yeah. Yet we are ruthless in pursuit of the good life, not recognizing that it can only be obtained by attending to its proper causes. We want comfort, we want to be free of suffering, but actually, to be free of suffering is to have great desire, to be voracious, is that a good cause to be free of suffering? That's actually a cause for more suffering, isn't it? So 58, again with the same refrain each time. Although I have many new friendships, my modesty and friendships are of short duration. Chita chung. One of the texts says chita tung are tungwa few. We have the duration of our sincerity and modesty. Although we can sometimes meet new friends on many occasions, we can meet friends quite often. Our sincerity and our what's the word we use? What do we call it? Here's translating modesty. Telyo is a particular kind of mental factor when we take ourself and others into consideration to avoid creating negative karma. To be modest, to be, and the other word, shungwa, has to do with sincerity. So we have, our sincerity and our consideration, that's the word I'm looking for. Consideration for others is of short duration. So we meet people, but we're not really sincere and we're not really considerate. Although, here it says, although I freeload off of others, I eagerly pursue those who pilfer. Actually, that translation doesn't fit with either Geshe-la's translation or the actual meaning. It looks like, although I am kind of you could say a parasite, tut dung chen. Tu means food and victuals, things that you eat. Dumba means aspire. Che means great. Although I have great desire for food and so forth, for consumables, you could say, although I'm an epicure, or maybe you could say a parasite. Here it says, although I freeload off of others, I eagerly pursue those who pilfer. Actually, I think that the meaning is, I put effort into seeking things through stealing or pilfering them. It doesn't mean I pursue those who pilfer. I think Geshe-la, those of you who are reading the commentary here, Geshe-la says, this verse deals with relationships. This is 58, right? In Tibet, traveling entertainers announce their entrance into a town with drums. The townspeople who are attracted by the drum rolls rush over to them without even knowing what is going on. Similarly, we always run around attracted by wealth, comfort, good food, and fine clothing. If we can't acquire these things legitimately, we try to obtain them by some underhanded means. This is what was translated here as, I eagerly pursue those who pilfer. I don't think that's exactly the meaning. I think it means I engage in stealing and pilfering and illegal means. Sometimes, even though the translators had Geshe-la's presence, they may not have gotten it right. Here it says in the translation from Dharamsala, with comparative ease we develop new friendships, yet since we are callous, not one of them lasts. We are filled with the desire for food and fine clothing, yet failing to earn them, we steal and we scheme. So I think that's a little closer to the meaning, also with Geshe-zopa's commentary. So again, trample him. Is that what it was in? Trample him, dance on his head. Trample him, dance on the head of this treacherous concept of selfish concern. Tear out the heart of the self-centered butcher who slaughters. Here it says our chance for final release. That's kind of that's a little commentarial. It just says the slaughterer, this who slaughters everything that's good. So all of these are now kind of emphasizing, calling on Yamataka, calling on, perhaps if we were practicing that kind of tantra, how we should use our wrathful energy, rather than using it to get angry at the outside, rather than getting angry, to use that wrathful energy and sublimate it into some wrath toward self-grasping, seeing that that's the real enemy. Self-cherishing thought, self-grasping. Does it make sense? I'm glad that makes sense. Okay. Then 59. Although I am skilled at flattery and asking for things indirectly, I like one of the other texts said innuendo. Although I am skilled at flattery and innuendo, my despair is great. Although I assiduously amass things, miserliness binds me. Well, let's take the second one first. I assiduously amass things. I put a lot of effort into amassing things, right? And getting things. What do you get? Money, your vitamins, your stash. What else? People, friends, family, children, car, condominium. Here's not so much condominium. It's in Singapore. What else what do we amass? And we're never satisfied with them. Chocolates. Experiences. Yet, even though I assiduously amass things, miserliness binds me. Although I am skilled at flattery and innuendo to get things, my despair is great. Here the other text translates that as, we are experts at flattering others for favors, yet always complaining we are sad and depressed. The money we have gathered we cannot bear to part with. Like misers we hoard it. We feel we are poor. So even the things that we amass, even the things that we get, don't really satisfy us. I can remember very vividly once being with some friend, a girlfriend when I was in college, a girlfriend, and just feeling the tension of miserliness and attachment, not really being able to enjoy the other person's presence because of the in my own mind, the presence of, let's say, attachment, afraid of losing, afraid of making some mistake. So the same thing with our possessions, isn't it? We have things, but we can't really enjoy them because we're afraid of them being depleted. We put so much effort into accumulating them. Let me read you what Geshe Darge said about this verse. This is in this other numeration. This is verse 60. Geshe said, we are skilled at flattering for gain. We do not ask bluntly, but rather indirectly suggest, what you gave me last year was very useful. This is one of the wrong livelihoods, right? The 5 wrong livelihoods. For Dharma practitioners, this form of wrong livelihood is very bad. As Shantideva says, one should not live either from wealth gained by claiming an undeserved share through one's power or authority, like the kings who levy unreasonable tax. Other forms of wrong livelihood are giving while expecting something in return. Giving something small. You have a very rich friend or grandma, and you give something small with the expectation they'll give you something big back. You give something small to your benefactor. Or that gained through hypocrisy. When you're hypocritical. For instance, the story of Geshe Bungengel. I think I mentioned this before. When he was expecting some patrons to come to his cave, and he cleaned up the cave, his altar that was usually quite dirty, and he put the water bowls out and arranged everything up very nicely, cleaned them out. And then when he recognized that he was doing so, acting hypocritically, because he expecting that if the patrons saw that everything was very nice, they would make more offering, he took ashes from his fire and threw them on the altar. And one of the clairvoyant lamas in the area recognized at that moment Bungengal had made Geshe Bungengal had made the sort of a pure offering. You know, you might think, well, before he'd had look like pure offerings, before nice food and things on the altar, pure water, now he'd thrown dust over them. That was the pure offering, because he was doing it without self-cherishing, without that kind of thought of doing something to impress people. It's kind of deceitful attitude. Getting up unusually early to make special preparations and offerings when one knows that one's patron is coming for a visit, hoping to impress them. We live by the 5 wrong livelihoods, yet think of ourselves as starving. We always think we are lacking something. We do not wear, but lock away clothes we have, and likewise we hoard food that we don't eat. We haven't eaten yet. Although we do have a little money and some goods under the bondage of miserliness, we are unable to be generous or make offerings. All of these mistakes are the responsibility of self-cherishing attitude. Trample upon him. So as I mentioned on some other occasions, I sometimes show off my literary acumen by mentioning my archetypal example of this kind of miserliness is that Uncle Scrooge. You know Uncle Scrooge? Was Donald Duck's Scrooge McDuck or whatever he's called? You know, my great literary adventures. You know who Scrooge is? Yeah? So miserly that he can't even enjoy what he has. Do you ever can you notice that in your own mind? Yeah. Sometimes you have something and you're the whole purpose in having it is either to enjoy yourself or to be able to share with others, but sometimes you can't even enjoy it yourself for fear of it depleting. This is caused by the self-cherishing thought. 60. Although whatever I have done has been insignificant, I am swollen with pride. Actually, another way of translating that is this term that they've taken is swollen with pride, dukyu. It looks like it's a phrase in Old Tibetan that kind of means I tell people, I remind them again and again how much I've done. Like, although I've done something very little, I've helped people in some small way, I tell them again and again, I've done, I did this and that, I've done so much for you. That I think that's more the implication here. Although what I have done is really insignificant, I tell people again and again how much I have done. Although I have no reputation, my hunger for it is great. So again, these are I thirst for reputation, and that is one of the causes of not getting it. Although although I've done very little for others, I'm always making a big deal about what little I've done. Geshe says, this verse points out to us our wrong views. Even though we haven't shown the least bit of kindness for others, we keep reminding them of all we have done. If we do good for others, it should be done discreetly, without the recipient knowing. Boasting and bragging are negative traits arising out of self-cherishing. So I think those two lines are related that way. It's sort of like where it says that swollen with pride, it means I tell people again and again, kind of trying to develop some reputation. Yet I have no reputation because of that, acting in that way. I have no good reputation. 61. Although my preceptors are many. What do preceptors mean? Teachers? Mm-hmm. Someone who gives you vows. Here I think it says logon. Logon, yeah. Logon actually means acharya in Sanskrit. And so it can mean teachers. It can also, in the monastic tradition, the one who gives you your vows are called acharya, lobon. Here it doesn't, usually monks wouldn't have many of those kind of acharyas, they just have one. So maybe it means here, it means your teachers. In fact, Geshe-la says it is possible to have too many spiritual teachers. If you ignore or misinterpret their teachings, you will create strong negative results. So although my preceptors in this case, my teachers, are many, my ability to keep my vows is small. Actually, it kind of means more like I don't follow their instructions. Damsik kurshe chung. I don't have a strong force of respect for what they are instructing, the sacred words. Although my disciples are many, I give little time to help and look after them. So this is the result also of self-cherishing thought and self-grasping. 62. Although my promises are many, my practical assistance is minimal. Does that sound familiar? I remember many times when we received teachings from great lamas on the mind training, many of the people, we would be very quiet during teaching, and afterwards, always people were saying, oh gee, they were talking about me. It sounded like they had clairvoyance, they were just talking about me, my problems. Although my promises are many, my practical assistance is minimal. Kelang chela. Although I take on a lot, maybe you could say. Here it says, my promises. In practice, the practice of benefit is very small. I promise a lot, I talk a lot, but I don't benefit very much. Although my fame is great, if it were examined, the gods and demons would be put to shame. Pardon?
It says put me to shame.
Oh, okay. Although my fame is great, if it were examined, the gods and demons would put me to shame. Yeah, put me to shame. So, again, we were talking about in the world, there are people, a lot of people that are very powerful and famous in the world. But that itself is not an indication of, something that they are that is something to be emulated, their particular lifestyle. One of the I think I mentioned at the beginning of the course about the Four Reliances. Do you remember about the Four Reliances? The Buddha said you shouldn't rely on the person, meaning the charisma, but you should rely on the teaching. Very much today, people rely just on the personality of the person. I don't know, I always give this example of this guy with the big teeth at night. He was probably, was it Tony Robbins or something? What's his name?
You got it.
Is it Tony Robbins? Yeah. So very charismatic or something. Don't rely on the person, rely on the teachings. Don't rely on even of the teachings, of the words. Don't rely on just the euphony of the words, the nice sound of the words, which also, secondly, captivates people. Even if the person may not be charismatic, the words might be very captivating. Don't rely on just the nice soundingness of the words, but rely on their meaning. It's a second reliance. Don't rely on the interpretative meaning of the words, but the definitive meaning, what actually is being said, to delve into it. And the fourth reliance is of that definitive meaning, don't rely on a conceptual understanding alone, say inferential cognition, but ultimately try to realize it through direct perception. Those are called the Four Reliances. So there are a lot of people that are very charismatic, and we wish to be that way ourselves sometimes. We wish to be famous and well-known. But sometimes that kind of putting ourselves in that position is actually a great detriment. If you have a lot of responsibilities, I almost sometimes myself, I sometimes appreciate not being well known, because if I were well known, if I were well known with what little knowledge I have now, it wouldn't really be beneficial to others. Maybe it would be better to, whatever karma that we might have to be famous, be better to let that ripen in the future when I have good qualities that could actually benefit them. Does that make sense to you? So rather than, rather than wanting to be famous now, or to be, in some kind of position or power, think, I may have some karma for that. If I really strove right now, I might be able to manipulate outer conditions so that karma could ripen. But right now, I'd be in a position where I wouldn't really be able to help others. It would be a big sham, and it would cause my own ego to be inflated, and I wouldn't really practice. 63. Although my learning is scant, my penchant for empty verbiage is great. Again, I think this is a wrong translation. This is talking about, it says, Tonke bekam che. It means I boastfully speak about emptiness. Although I don't know a lot, I talk boastfully about realizing emptiness. This is how the commentators also take that. It's not like empty verbiage. Unless you understood empty verbiage as meaning talking about emptiness. Usually that means, empty verbiage really means what? Pardon? Talking about nothing, right? Here it's, you could maybe understand it that way, but the commentators take it as meaning that my speech about emptiness is very, haughty. Although the extent of my scriptural understanding, here it says religious instructions, is slight, I pretend to understand everything. Again, I don't think that's exactly I think they were rushing through the translation here. Actually, to translate these things, sometimes some things sound good, but they don't actually get to the actual meaning. So one has to be very careful. Lungya chungla mitok gulatok. I think the other translation here, and a nicer, closer ring to it. We have read very little, heard only a few teachings, yet talk with authority and expertly on voidness. That's kind of the first part. Our knowledge of scriptures is pitifully lacking, yet glibly we make up and say what we like. That's kind of the meaning. We talk a lot about emptiness. We make up, we don't know, we haven't really studied the scriptures. Someone confronted me the other day about, I was teasing them why they weren't coming to one of the classes any longer, and they said, I find more beneficial just to practice. But in order to practice, you need to know. We can talk about, sure, we have to practice, and intellectual, just it becoming intellectually studied is not going to necessarily change your mind. But without study, all of the great practitioners of the past studied at some time much in their careers in order to be able to understand the vital point of what to practice. In the monasteries, they always talk about the analogy of an armless rock climber, someone who's trying to climb a mountain without arms. That's like the meditator who tries to meditate without knowledge, without learning. So let's leave there and just do a short dedication. And don't forget about your exam at home for next week. Huh? So try to collect your concentration. Think of the merits that we've created tonight and those merits that we've created in the past and other lives that are not yet ripened. We can dedicate them all. It's not only dedicating these merits, but particularly these merits. Due to this karma that I've created tonight, may I truly, this life, be able to practice the mind training, to make it the heart of my practice, to really, sincerely be able to take the defeat, to be able to transform adverse conditions into the path by understanding the real enemy. It's self-cherishing, self-grasping. All the while recognizing my goal in doing so is not just overcoming my own suffering, although that's a subsidiary benefit, but for the welfare of all sentient beings, so that I don't harm them, so that I can ultimately benefit them, so that I can reach the state of Buddhahood where I perfect the welfare of myself and others. Dharmakaya, perfect welfare of myself, totally blissful, omniscient, and the form bodies, the Rupakayas, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, the welfare of others to be able to emanate in whatever form is necessary to benefit them. And try to seal that in the realization of emptiness of the three spheres. The karma created, the goal dedicated to, and the act of dedication are all empty of true existence.